How's it going, everybody? And thank you for joining me on Out of the Bothros for Weekly Word Wednesday. So last week we were doing our Son of Man series through Ezekiel. We saw some pretty explicit content there that we were going through. We kind of got a sense of what was going on as far as how Israel was presenting itself, and it wasn't very ladylike, it seems. We also see here that because of what Israel was doing, the Lord came and spoke through Ezekiel to them, saying basically that because of what they've done and they've acted like their sister Samaria, that they're going to go ahead and have to endure the same kind of judgments and enduring the same punishments that Samaria is also going to have to go through. So the Lord kind of explained what that was going to look like, and then we'll continue here through chapter 27 to see kind of what's going on. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take up a lament concerning Tyre. Say to Tyre, situated at the gate, the gateway to the sea, merchants of peoples on many coasts. This is what the sovereign Lord says. You say, O Tyre, I am perfect in beauty. Your domain was on the high seas. Your builders brought your beauty to perfection. They made all your timbers of pine trees from Sinir. They took a cedar from Lebanon to make a mast for you. Of oaks from Bashan they made your oars. Of cypress wood from the coasts of Cyprus they made your deck, inlaid with ivory. Fine embroidered linen from Egypt was your sail, and served as your banner. Your awnings were of blue and purple. From the coasts of Elisha, men of Sidon and Arvad were your oarsmen. Your skilled men, O Tyre, were aboard as your seamen. Veteran craftsmen of Gebal were on board, as shipwrights to caulk your seams. All the ships of the sea and their sailors came alongside to trade for your wares. Men of Persia, Lydia, and Put served as soldiers in your army. They hung their shields and helmets on your walls, bringing you splendor. Men of Arvad and Helek manned your walls on every side. Men of Gamad were in your towers. They hung their shields around your walls. They brought your beauty to perfection. Tarshish did business with you because of your great wealth of goods. They exchanged silver, iron, tin, and lead for your merchandise. Greece, Tubal, and Meshech traded with you. They exchanged slaves and articles of bronze for your wares. Men of Beth Tagma exchanged workhorses, war horses, and mules for your merchandise. The men of Rhodes traded with you, and many coastlands were your customers. They paid you with ivory, tusks, and ebony. Aram did business with you because of your many products. They exchanged turquoise, purple, fabric, embroidered work, fine linen, coral, and rubies for your merchandise. Judah and Israel traded with you. They exchanged wheat for manith, and confections of honey, oil, and balm for your wares. Damascus, because of your many products and great wealth of goods, did business with you in wine from Helbon and wool from Zahar. Danites and Greeks from Uzal brought your merchandise. They exchanged wrought iron, cassia, and calmus for your wares. Dedan traded in saddles, blankets with you. Arabia and all the princes of Kedar were your customers. They did business with you in lambs, rams, and goats. The merchants of Sheba and Ramah traded with you. For your merchandise, they exchanged the finest of all kinds of spices and precious stones and gold. Haran, Caneh, and Eden, and merchants of Sheba, Ashur, and Kilmad traded with you. In your marketplace, they traded with you beautiful garments, blue fabric, embroidered work, and multicolored rugs with cords twisted and tightly knotted. The ships of Tarshish serve as carriers for your wares. You are filled with heavy cargo in the heart of the sea. Your oarsmen take you out to the high seas, but the east wind will break you to pieces in the heart of the sea. Your wealth, merchandise, and wares, your mynheers, seamen, and shipwrights, your merchandise and all your soldiers, and everyone else on board, will sink into the heart of the sea on the day of your shipwreck. The shorelands will quake when your seamen cry out. All who handle the oars will abandon their ships. The mariners and all the seamen will stand on the shore. They will raise their voice and cry bitterly over you. They will sprinkle dust on their heads and roll in ashes. They will shave their heads because of you and put on sackcloth. They will weep over you with anguish of soul and with bitter mourning. As they wail and mourn over you, they will take up lament concerning you. Who has ever silenced like Tyre, surrounded by the sea? When your merchandise went out on the seas, you satisfied many nations. With your great wealth and wares, you enriched the kings of the earth. Now you are shattered by the sea in the depths of the waters. Your wares and all your company have gone down with you. All who live in the coastlands are appalled at you. Their kings shudder with horror, and their faces are distorted with fear. The merchants among the nations hiss at you, and have come to a horrible end, and will be no more. Chapter 28. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, say to the ruler of Tyre, this is what the sovereign Lord says. In the pride of your heart you say, I am a god. I sit on the throne of a god, in the hearts of the seas. But you are a man, not a god. Though you think you are as wise as a god, you are wiser. Are you wiser than Daniel? Is no secret hidden from you? But your wisdom and understanding you have gained wealth for yourself, and amassed gold and silver in your treasures. But your great skill in trading, and you have increased your wealth. And because of your wealth, your heart has grown proud. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Because you think you are wise as a god, I am going to bring foreigners against you, the most ruthless of nations. They will draw their swords against your beauty and wisdom, and pierce your shining splendor. They will bring you down to the pit, and you will die a violent death. In the hearts of the seas, will you then say, I am a god? In the presence of those who kill you, you will be but a man, not a god, in the hands of those who slay you. You will die the death of uncircumcised at the hands of the foreigners. I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take up a lament concerning the king of Tyre, and say to him, this is what the sovereign Lord says. You were the model of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adored you. Ruby, topaz, and emerald, chrysolite, onyx, and jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I adorned you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, till wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence, and you sinned. So I drove you in disgrace from the mount of God, and I expelled you, O guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom. Because of your splendor, so I threw you to the earth. I made a spectacle of you before the kings. By your many sins and dishonest trade, you have desecrated your sanctuaries. So I made a fire come out from you, and it consumed you, and I reduced you to ashes on the ground. In the sight of all who were watching, all the nations who knew you were appalled at you. You have come to a horrible end, and will be no more. Okay, so right here, this is kind of actually an important piece. This sounds very much like Lucifer's fall. And the description of the guardian cherub. So we can see that Tyre may have had a position here to actually represent, and may or may not have actually been supposed to be the reflection of God, and they fell short of that. is kind of what I'm getting from this explanation here. So it does sound very familiar in that morning star fall. So we'll continue here in verse 20. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against Sidon, prophesy against her, and say, This is what the sovereign Lord says, I am against you, O Sidon, and I will gain glory within you. They will know that I am the Lord, when I inflict punishment on her, and show myself holy within her. I will send a plague upon her, and make blood flow in her streets. The slain will fall within her, with the sword against her on every side. Then they will know that I am the Lord. No longer will the people of Israel have malicious neighbors who are painful bearers and sharp thorns. Then they will know that I am the sovereign Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. When I gather the people of Israel from the nations where they have been scattered, I will show myself holy among them in the sights of the nations. Then they will live in their own land, which I give to my servant Jacob. They will live there in safety and will build houses and plant vineyards. They will live in safety when I inflict punishment on all their neighbors who maligned them. Then they will know that I am the Lord their God. Chapter 29. In the 10th year, on the 10th month, on the 12th day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, set your face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Speak to him and say, This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, your great monster lying among the streams. You say, The Nile is mine. I made it for myself. But I will put hooks in your jaws and make the fish of your streams stick to your scales. I will pull out from among your streams with all the fish sticking to your scales. I will leave you in the desert, you and all the fish of your streams. You will fall on the open field and not be gathered or picked up. I will give you as food to the beasts of the earth and the birds of the air. Then all who live in Egypt will know that I am the Lord. You have been a staff of reed for the house of Israel. When they grasped you with their hands, they splintered, and you tore open their shoulders. When they leaned on you, you broke, and their backs were wrenched. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will bring a sword against you and kill your men and their animals. Egypt will become a desolate wasteland. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Because you said, The Nile is mine, I made it. Therefore I am against you and against your streams. And I will make the land of Egypt a ruin and a desolate waste, from Migdol to Aswan, as far as the borders of Cush. No foot of man or animal will pass through it. No one will live there for 40 years. I will make the land of Egypt desolate among the devastated lands, and her cities will lie desolate 40 years among the ruined cities. And I will disperse the Egyptians among the nations and scatter them through the countries. Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says. At the end of the 40 years I will gather the Egyptians from the nations where they were scattered. I will bring them back from captivity and return them to Upper Egypt, the land of their ancestry. There will be a lowly kingdom. It will be the lowliest of kingdoms and will never again exalt itself above other nations. I will make it so weak that it will never again rule over the nations. Egypt will no longer be a source of confidence for the people of Israel, but will be a reminder of their sin in turning to her for help. Then they will know that I am the sovereign Lord. In the 27th year, in the first month, on the first day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, drove his army in a hard campaign against Tyre. Every head was rubbed bare, and every shoulder made raw. Yet he and his army got no reward from their campaign he led against Tyre. Therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am going to give Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he will carry off its wealth. He will loot and plunder the land as pay for his army. I have given him Egypt as a reward for his effort, because he and his army did it for me, declares the sovereign Lord. On that day I will make a horn grow from the house of Israel. I will open your mouth among them, then they will know that I am the Lord. Chapter 30. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, prophesy and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Wail and say, alas for that day, for the day is near. The day of the Lord is near, a day of clouds, a time of doom for the nations. A sword will come against Egypt, and anguish will come against Cush. When the slain fall in Egypt, her wealth will be carried away, and her foundations torn down. Cush and Put, Lydia and all Arabia, Libya and all the people of the covenant land will fall by the sword along with Egypt. This is what the Lord says. The allies of Egypt will fall, and her proud strength will fail. From Migdol to Aswan, they will fall by the sword within her, declares the sovereign Lord. They will be desolate among desolate lands, and their cities will lie among ruined cities. They will know that I am the Lord, when I set fire to Egypt and all her helpers are crushed. On that day messengers will go out from me in ships to frighten Cush out of her complacency. Anguish will take hold of them on the day of Egypt's doom, for it is sure to come. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I will put an end to the hordes of Egypt by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He and his army, the most ruthless of nations, will be brought in to destroy the land. They will draw their swords against Egypt and fill the land with the slain. I will dry up the streams of the Nile and sell the lands to evil men. By the hands of foreigners I will lay waste the land and everything in it. I, the Lord, have spoken. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I will destroy the idols and put an end to the images of Memphis. No longer there be a prince in Egypt, and I will spread fear throughout the land. I will lay waste Upper Egypt, set fire to Zoan, and inflict punishment on Thebes. I will pour out my wrath on Pelusium, the stronghold of Egypt, and cut off the hordes of Thebes. It's probably just Thebes. I will set fire to Egypt. Pelusium will writhe in agony. Thebes will be taken by storm. Memphis will be in the constant distress. The young men of Heliopolis and Bubastis will fall by the sword, and the cities themselves will go into captivity. Dark will be the day at Tahpanhes, when I break the yoke of Egypt. There her proud strength will come to an end. She will be covered with clouds, and her villages will go into captivity. So I will inflict punishment on Egypt, and they will know that I am the Lord. In the 11th year, in the first month, on the 7th day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. It has not been bound up for healing or put in a splint so as to become strong enough to hold a sword. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against Pharaoh, king of Egypt. I will break both his arms, the good arm as well as the broken one, and make the sword fall from his hand. I will disperse the Egyptians among the nations and scatter them through the countries. I will strengthen the arms of the kings of Babylon and put my sword in his hand, but I will break the arms of Pharaoh, and he will groan before him like a mortally wounded man. I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, but the arms of Pharaoh will fall limp. Then they will know that I am the Lord, when I put my sword into the hands of the kings of Babylon, and he brandishes it against Egypt. I will disperse the Egyptians among the nations and scatter them throughout the countries. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Chapter 31. In the 11th year, in the 3rd month, on the 1st day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, say to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and to his hordes, who can be compared with you in majesty? Consider Assyria, once a cedar in Lebanon, with beautiful branches overshadowing the forest. It towered on high. Its tops above the thick foliage, the waters nourished it. Deep springs made it grow tall. their streams flowed all around its base and sent their channels to all the trees of the field, so it towered high, higher than all the trees of the field. Its boughs increased and its branches grew long, spreading because of abundant waters. All the birds of the air nested in its boughs. All the beasts of the field gave birth under its branches. All the great nations lived in its shade. It was majestic in beauty. With its spreading boughs, from its roots went down to abundant waters. The cedars in the garden of God could not rival it, nor could the pine trees equal its boughs, nor could the plane trees compare with its branches. No tree in the garden of God could match its beauty. I made it beautiful, with abundant branches, the envy of all the trees of Eden, in the garden of God. So here again is another reference that you guys should pay attention to. Therefore this is what the Sovereign Lord says. Because it towered on high, lifting its tops above the thick foliage, and because it was proud of its height, I handed it over to the rulers of the nations. For him to deal with it according to its wickedness, I cast it aside. And the most ruthless of foreign nations cut it down and left it. Its boughs fell on the mountains and in the valleys. Its branches lay broken in all the ravines of the land. All the nations of the earth came out from under its shade and left it. All the birds of the air settled on the fallen tree, and all the beasts of the field were among its branches. Therefore no other trees by the waters are ever to tower proudly on high, lifting their tops above the thick foliage. No other trees so well watered are ever to reach such a height. They are all destined for death, for the earth below, among mortal men, with those who go down to the pit. Alright, so let's go ahead and reread that real quick. Verse 14. Therefore no other tree by the waters are ever to tower proudly on high, lifting their tops above the thick foliage. No other tree so well watered are ever to reach such a height. They are all destined for death. For the earth below, among mortal men, with those who go down to the pit. This is what the Sovereign Lord says. On the day it was brought down to the grave, I covered the deep spring with mourning for it. I held back its streams, and its abundant waters were restored. Because of it, I clothed Lebanon with gloom, and all the trees of the field withered away. I made the nations tremble at the sound of its fall, when I brought it down to the grave, with those who go down to the pit. Then all the trees of Eden, the choicest and best of Lebanon, all the trees that were well watered, were consoled in the earth below. Those who lived in its shade, its allies among the nations, had also gone down to the grave with it, joining those killed by the sword. Which of the trees of Eden can be compared with you in splendor and majesty? Yet you too will be brought down with the trees of Eden to the earth below. You will lie among the uncircumcised with those killed by the sword. This is Pharaoh and all his hordes, declares the Sovereign Lord. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and finish here in chapter 32. We'll go ahead and jump right into it. In the 12th year, in the 12th month, on the first day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, take up a lament concerning Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and say to him, You are like a lion among the nations. You are like a monster in the seas, thrashing about in your streams, churning the waters with your feet, and muddying the streams. This is what the Sovereign Lord says. With a great throng of people I will cast my net over you, and they will haul you up in my net. I will throw you on the land and hurl you on the open field. I will let all the birds of the air settle on you, and all the beasts of the earth gorge themselves on you. I will spread your flesh on the mountains. I will fill the valleys with your remains. I will drench the land with your flowing blood all the way to the mountains, and the ravines will be filled with your flesh. When I snuff you out, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. All the shining lights in the heavens will darken over you. I will bring darkness over your land, declares the sovereign Lord. I will trouble the hearts of many peoples when I bring about your destruction among the nations. Among lands you have not known, I will cause many people to be appalled at you, and their kings will shudder with horror because of you. When I brandish my sword before them, on the day of your downfall, each of them will tremble every moment for his life. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. The sword of the king of Babylon will come against you. I will cause your hordes to fall. By the swords of mighty men, the most ruthless of all nations, they will shatter the pride of Egypt, and all her hordes will be overthrown. I will destroy all her cattle from beside abundant waters, no longer to be strided by the foot of man, or muddled by the hooves of cattle. Then I will let her waters settle, and make her streams flow like oil, declares the sovereign Lord, when I make Egypt desolate, and strip the land of everything in it. When I strike down all who live there, then they will know that I am the Lord. This is the lament they will chant for her. The daughters of the nations will chant it. For Egypt and all her hordes will chant it, declares the sovereign Lord. In the 12th year, on the 15th day of the month, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, wail for the hordes of Egypt, and consign to the earth below both her and the daughters of mighty nations. With those who go down to the pit, say to them, Are you more favored than others? Go down and be laid among the uncircumcised. They will fall among those killed by the sword. The sword is drawn, let her be dragged off with all her hordes. From within the graves, the mighty leaders will say of Egypt and her allies, They have come down, and they will lie with the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword. Assyria is there with her whole army. She is surrounded by the graves of all her slain, all who have fallen by the sword. Their graves are in the depths of the pit, and her armies lie around their graves. All who have spread terror in the land of the slain are slain, fallen by the sword. So we see here Assyria has a reference to last week as well. They were kind of the one of the nations that Israel had defiled itself with. It was the nation of blue. And then we go verse 4-24 here. Elam is there with all her hordes around her grave. All of them are slain, fallen by the sword. All who had spread terror in the land of the living went down uncircumcised to the earth below. They bear their shame with those who go down to the pit. A bed is made for her among the slain, with all her hordes around her grave. All of them are uncircumcised, killed by the sword. Because their terror had spread in the land of the living, they bear their shame with those who go down to the pit. They are laid among the slain. Meshech and Tubal are there, with all their hordes around their graves. All of them are uncircumcised, killed by the sword because they spread their terror in the land of the living. Do they not lie with the uncircumcised warriors who have fallen, who went down to the grave with their weapons of war, whose swords were placed in their heads, to punish for their sins rested on their bones? Though the terror of these warriors had stalked through the land of the living, you too, O Pharaoh, will be broken and will lie among the uncircumcised, with those who killed by the sword. Edom is there, her kings and all her princes, despite their power. They are laid with those killed by the sword. They lie with the uncircumcised, with those who go down to the pit. All the princes of the north, all the Shidonians are there. They are down with the slain and disgraced, despite the terror caused by their power. They lie uncircumcised with those killed by the sword, and bear their shame with those who go down to the pit. Pharaoh, he and all his army, will see them, and he will be consoled. For all his hordes were killed by the sword, declares the sovereign Lord. Although I had him spread terror in the land of the living, Pharaoh and all his hordes will be laid among the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword, declares the sovereign Lord. So we can see there's a couple of references here to the nations and what they did. We see some nations were actually meant to represent the Lord and do certain tasks for Him, but because of their own pride, their own actions, their own kind of haughtiness, and we see that they were raised tall, some of these nations, and because that like inflated their egos, it seems like they began to just do the same actions, lose sight of the living God, and do the same thing. So they're all kind of going to see the same justice because there is no favoritism with the Lord. He does choose certain people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that means that they're not accountable for their actions. So we see here that based off of everybody's actions, you live by the sword, die by the sword. So we see here everyone's coming to the same fall. They're all going to end up in the pit here. And all of them are going to be pretty much laid on equal ground. It seems that throughout all of this, it's basically coming to Israel, and all these nations that were chosen by the Lord have all kind of just made themselves equal to the lowest of the low. They have taken their high status, inflated their ego, misstepped, pretty much showed that high status meant nothing when they could fall so easily. And then basically they've all soiled themselves to the point where nobody's up at the top anymore. We've all fallen down and just have completely been covered in our own filth for the most part. So we're all to be dealt with here. I did kind of want to make a point. I've been kind of thinking about it. It's funny too. It seems here that we have a reference, to the original red and blue from last week, and I thought that was kind of funny because it does seem like maybe the Crips and Bloods are a little bit older than we thought. But anyways, that was just kind of a joke. But we're going to go ahead next week here and jump into chapter 33 and go through and continue through Ezekiel and just see where this is all going as we see basically Israel and all these other proud nations start to come to an end. One other reference I do want to see, because we'll hear about it later on in the New Testament, is this reference to Israel trading with the other nations for balms and oils and honey. Kind of keep that in mind as we go through, because that'll actually pop back up later as well. So if you guys have any questions, comments, want to relate anything, go ahead and leave them in the comments section. And that's pretty much about it. Hope to be hearing from you guys, and I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.